I had not meant to give him the coin. That is the first thing worth saying, before this story turns into something it was not at the start. I had meant to drop it into the alms bowl at the gate and walk past with my hood up and my eyes down, like every other unclaimed woman dragged to Iron Hollow that week. The bowl was overflowing. The boy supposed to be guarding it was watching a juggler, and the man sitting on the cold stone with his back against the wall did not look like he was going to ask anyone for anything. That was probably what did it. He was wrapped in a cloak that had been good once and was not now. His hair was unbrushed and the colour of wet bark. There was a streak of dried mud along one cheekbone he had not bothered to wipe off. He was watching the courtyard the way a man watches a river, patiently, like the river had not yet shown him what he had come to see. I had passed my 22nd winter, which, by pack law, meant I was 4 years past the age I should have been claimed, and 2 years past the age my mother had stopped pretending she was not embarrassed about it. I had come to the claiming feast because my brother Aldrich had begged me to, and because the alternative was sitting in our cottage listening to him cough. I had not come to be chosen. I stopped in front of the man with the mud on his face and reached into my purse. There was 1 coin left in it, copper, thin from handling. I had been planning to buy bread on the road home. I crouched and pressed it into his palm. His hand was warm. That surprised me. Everything else about him looked cold. "For your trouble," I said, which was a foolish thing to say, because what trouble could he possibly have that a single copper would fix? But the words were already out. I tucked them away to be ashamed of later. He looked up. His eyes were the colour of pale river ice, which is to say, grey at the edges and going somewhere darker in the middle. They moved across my face, the way a hand moves across a page, in a language one has just realised one can read. He did not blink for what felt like a long time. "I will remember it," he said. His voice was lower than I had been ready for. Educated, somehow, in a way the rest of him was not. I stood up too quickly. My knees did the small, treacherous thing knees do when one has not eaten since dawn. I pulled my hood further over my hair and walked into the great hall. I did not look back. I should have looked back. The Iron Hollow Hall was the largest indoor space I had ever stood inside. The ceiling went up and up into a darkness lit only by iron chandeliers, each one shaped like a stag's antlers and burning with candles thicker than my wrist. The floor was flagstone, polished by 3 centuries of boots. 3 long tables ran the length of the room. The far wall was a single tapestry, a black wolf, jaws open, standing over a broken crown. The unclaimed women had been put on the second table, the one nearest the door. We were not the point of the evening. The point of the evening was at the front, on a dais carved from a single piece of dark oak, where an empty chair sat beside the wolf throne. The Alpha King's seat. The Alpha King's empty seat. I had heard about him my whole life. Halvar of Iron Hollow. The wolf who had taken the throne at 23 by killing the cousin who tried to take it from him, and had ruled for 9 years without challenge since. They said he never smiled in public. They said his wolf was the largest anyone had seen in living memory. They said he had refused to take a Luna for so long that the council had finally forced his hand by ordering a claiming feast he had not asked for. They said he was very, very angry about it. I helped myself to bread and decided I was going to leave before he showed up. A woman to my left elbowed me. "Eat slow, he has not arrived yet." I noticed. He may not arrive at all. They say he has refused 3 feasts already. Lucky him. She laughed, a small, startled laugh, like she had not expected to be amused tonight. "You do not want to be chosen?" "I want to go home before the snow," I said, which was true, and also incomplete. The fuller truth was that I had watched my mother be claimed and discarded twice in her life, and I had decided when I was 12 I would do neither. The woman opened her mouth to say something else, and then her eyes lifted past me, and the entire hall went quiet at once. I did not need to turn around to know who had walked in. You can feel a room reorient when an alpha enters it. The air does a thing. The people do a thing. Even the candle flames seem to lean. I turned anyway, because I was 22 and stupid, and I had never seen a king. He had stopped at the great doors. He had not yet taken a single step into the hall. He was wearing black, a long coat closed to the throat, no ornament, no chain of office, no crown. 3 men flanked him, 2 warriors, and a beater I would later learn was named Bron. His hair was still the colour of wet bark, and his cheekbones were still sharp, and there was no mud on his face anymore. He was looking directly at me. I felt the bread go dry in my mouth. I had given my last coin to the Alpha King. The Alpha King had been sitting in a dirty cloak at his own gate, watching his own claiming feast walk past him, and I had crouched in front of him and called him trouble. I sat down very slowly. His gaze did not follow me. He walked the length of the hall at the pace of a man who has nowhere to be and an entire kingdom waiting for him to get there. He did not look at the unclaimed women. He did not look at the dais. He did not look at anyone. When he reached the wolf throne, he did not sit. "Sigrun," he said. A woman rose from the first table. She was beautiful in the way a sword is beautiful, narrow, polished, sharp at the edges. Her hair was the colour of pale wheat and braided with iron rings. She was wearing a green dress cut to display a heritage pendant the size of a thumb. I knew her name before he spoke it, because every village I had passed through on the way here had named her as the obvious next Luna. "My king," Sigrun Vale said, and her voice did the small, triumphant thing voices do when they have just been chosen in public. "Did you arrange the alms bowl at the gate this evening?" A pause, a very small one. "My king?" "The alms bowl. The boy guarding it. The beggar who has been sitting beside it since noon." "I do not understand the question." "Then you did not arrange it?" "No, my king." "Good," said the Alpha King. He sat down. He had not raised his voice once. He had not so much as moved his hand. And yet the entire hall now understood that something had happened, and that Lady Sigrun Vale had failed a test no one had told her she was being given. I stared at my bread. I did not look up for the rest of the meal. I was, of course, summoned. I had hoped, for approximately the duration of the soup course, that I had imagined the whole thing, that the king had been looking at the doorway behind me, that the test he had set at the alms bowl had been for someone else, and my single copper had simply landed in it the way a leaf lands in a stream. The man who came for me had a face like a worn shield, and the kind of patience that suggested he had collected many women from many tables in his life. "Mistress," he said, "His Grace requests your attendance." "I am Wren," I said, because I had decided on the walk between tables that if I was going to be humiliated in front of the entire hall, I was going to be humiliated by my own name. "Not mistress." "Wren," he agreed, perfectly evenly. "His Grace requests your attendance." I rose. I did not look at Lady Sigrun. I did not look at the unclaimed women. I walked the length of the hall under the gaze of the largest indoor crowd of my life and tried to remember how knees worked. He was waiting for me in a small antechamber off the dais. The door was open, There were 2 guards outside it, and no one inside. He was standing by a narrow window, looking at the courtyard where I had crouched in front of him 3 hours ago. He turned when I came in. The mud was gone, the cloak was gone. The dirty hair was clean and pushed back from his face. But his eyes were the same, pale river ice going darker in the middle, and they were looking at me the same way they had looked when I called him trouble. "You did not bow," he said. I noticed. He did the smallest possible movement with his mouth. It was not a smile. It was the place a smile starts before a man decides whether to allow it. "I owe you a coin," he said. He reached into the pocket of his black coat and produced it. My copper. Thin from handling. He had carried it with him from the gate to the dais to this room. He set it down on the windowsill between us. I turned the coin once in my fingers. That was a test. It was. For her. For several of them. You were not one of them. Why not? Because you were not on the list. He said this so plainly, I did not at first understand. It was the most dangerous sentence anyone had said to me in 22 years. I picked up the coin. It was warm from his pocket. There is a list. There is. And I am not on it. You were not. I caught the tense. He watched me catch it. He did not look away. There was something happening in his face that he was working very hard to keep still. A thing in the corner of his mouth, a thing in the muscle of his jaw, a thing in the way he had not yet stepped any closer to me. "My king," I said, and I was surprised to hear that my voice was steady. "I have given you my last coin, and walked into your hall and stood in front of your court. If you have brought me here to tell me I was not on a list, that is acceptable. If you have brought me here for any other reason, I would like to know it now." He did step closer. 1 step, not 2. "I have brought you here," he said, "to apologise. If you are still with me, and I hope you are, because I am about to tell you the part I have never managed to tell straight, stay. Whatever you thought this story was about, it is about to be about something else. And if you are enjoying her voice, the small, wry one telling you all this, leave a comment somewhere along the way and tell me you are listening. It matters more than you would think. Now, the list. He did not give it to me that night. He told me there was one, and he told me I was on it now. And he told me he would explain in the morning. And then he had the beta with the shield face escort me to a guest chamber that was 3 times the size of my mother's cottage and had a fire already lit in it. I did not sleep. I watched the fire burn down to red coals, and I turned the copper coin over and over in my fingers, and I worked through the math. He had been at the gate. He had been there for hours. He had watched me walk in. He had known my name when I gave it to the man with the shield face. He had not asked Bronn to find out who the woman in the green hood was. He had known. By the time the candles guttered, I had assembled most of it. The pieces I had not assembled, he gave me himself the next morning, in the library. The library at Iron Hollow is not what one expects from a wolf king. It is the warmest room in the fortress. The walls are honey-coloured oak. The floor is layered with furs. 3 of the windows look east, so the morning sun pours in and lands on a long reading table in the middle of the room, where someone, Halvar as it turned out, had laid out a single piece of paper for me. It was a list of names, 46 of them, in a clean scribe's hand. Every name except one had been crossed out. Some had been crossed out cleanly. Some had been crossed out, and then a second time with vehemence. A few had small notes in the margin, in handwriting that was not the scribe's, sharper, more pressed down. Cruel to her sister, one note said. Beats her horses, said another. Spoke to a beggar like he was furniture. The single name that had not been crossed out was at the bottom. It was mine. It was added 2 weeks ago, said the Alpha King. He was sitting in a chair by the eastern window. He had not stood up when I came in. He had not greeted me. He had simply gestured at the table and let me find it myself. By whom? I already knew. By me. You have been to my village? 3 times. I sat down because my knees had done the treacherous thing again. The council ordered the feast, he said, after a moment. They have been ordering it for 2 years. I have been refusing. This summer, they sent me a list. 46 daughters of 46 houses. I was given to understand that I would attend the feast and choose, or I would be challenged. By whom? Whoever the council chose to send. I looked at the list. I looked at the small, fierce notes in the margins. Cruel to her sister. Beats her horses. Spoke to a beggar like he was furniture. You went to 46 villages. 43. 3 of them I had already met. And you crossed off every name. Yes. And then you added mine. Yes. And then you sat at the gate of your own feast, dressed as a beggar, to see who would walk past me. I sat at the gate, he said, very carefully, to see if I had been wrong. I looked up. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the eastern window. His hand was on the arm of the chair and his fingers were very still. Wrong how? Wrong about you. I waited. He did not finish. I have learned since that this is the thing about Halvar. When something costs him, he goes quieter, not louder. The bigger the admission, the smaller the voice. If you wait long enough, he will tell you the rest. If you press him, he will close like a fortress door. I waited. My wolf, he said eventually, still not looking at me. Decided in your father's barn 9 months ago. I was hunting boundary markers. You came out at dusk to feed a sick foal. I did not know your name. He did not care. He, my wolf. Your wolf decided what? He did look at me then, pale river ice, going darker in the middle. He looked at me for what felt like a long time, and I understood, slowly, that what he was about to say was not going to be the kind of admission that could be unsaid. That I was finished, he said, looking. I did not know what to do with my hands. I put them on the list, on either side of the only name that had not been crossed out, and I stared at the paper, because if I looked at him, I would do one of the things a person does in that moment, and I did not yet know which one. My hands found the edge of the table. My king. Halvar. Halvar. The library was very quiet. Outside, far below, I could hear someone training horses in the lower courtyard. A bell rang somewhere. A bird argued with another bird on the eastern sill. And you wanted to know, I said, whether you had been wrong. Yes. So you sat in your own gate in a dirty cloak. Yes. And I walked up to you and gave you a copper. You did. And called you trouble. You did that as well. There it was again. The smallest possible movement at the corner of his mouth. The thing he was working very hard to keep still. I picked up the list. I folded it in quarters. I did not give it back to him. I tucked it into the front of my dress, against my heart, because it was mine now, and because if a king was going to keep a copper from me for 3 hours, I was going to keep a list from him for the rest of my life. "All right," I said. He waited. "All right," I said again, because I had to say it twice to make it true. "I'm going to need a great deal more information than this, but not now." "Not now," he agreed. I left the library. I did not look back this time either. But for a different reason. Lady Sigrun Vale made her move on the 3rd day. She had not been sent home, which I learned later was a deliberate choice on Halvar's part. Sending her home publicly would have humiliated her house and started a small war. He had instead allowed her to remain at the feast under the assumption that her dignity required her to leave on her own. Sigrun's dignity, it turned out, was not the operative force in her decision-making. She came to me in the corridor outside the kitchens, where I had gone to find tea because I'd been awake for 3 nights running and was running out of patience with the dignity of being upstairs. She was wearing grey. She had braided iron rings through her hair again. She was not alone. 2 of her cousins were with her, and a man I did not recognise who was holding what looked like a writ. "Mistress Wren," she said. And the word mistress did the same work in her mouth that the word beggar had done in mine 3 days ago. "We have a matter of bloodlines to discuss." I set down my tea. "Pack law," she continued, "requires that any woman who stands before an alpha king at a claiming feast must be of confirmed pack lineage. Your village has no record of your father's pack. Your mother was claimed and rejected twice. We have prepared the forms." She gestured. The man with the writ produced it. "You will withdraw from the feast," she said, quietly. "You will leave Iron Hollow before nightfall, and you will not speak of having been here. The king will be informed that you became homesick. No one will suffer for it." It was an elegant trap, and she had clearly been planning it since the moment she watched me walk up the length of the hall. The forms were real. Pack law on lineage verification was real. Halvar himself could probably override it, but doing so publicly would suggest he was bending the law for a woman whose blood was, in fact, suspect. And Sigrun knew it. I looked at her for a moment. I had not slept. I was holding a cup of tea. I was 22 years old, and I had given my last coin to a king who had carried it in his pocket for 3 hours. And I was not, it turned out, in the mood. "Lady Sigrun," I said. "My mother was claimed and rejected twice because she chose poorly twice. That is not a lineage problem. That is a judgment problem. The judgment did not run in the family. I have made better choices than my mother, and I'm about to make another one now." I drank the rest of my tea. I set the cup down. I walked past her, around her cousins, past the man with the writ, and I went to find the Alpha King. He was in the lower courtyard, where someone had been training horses. He was watching a young mare being put through her paces by a thin boy who did not look old enough to ride her. He turned when he heard me coming. He saw my face. He did not ask what had happened. "Sigrun Vale," I said, "is in the kitchen corridor with a lineage writ and 2 cousins, attempting to have me legally withdrawn from the feast on the grounds that my pack ancestry cannot be verified. She has given me until nightfall." He looked at me for a long moment. "Did she?" he said, very softly. "She did." He turned to the beater who had appeared at his elbow without my noticing. "Bronn, find the council clerk. I want the original writ Sigrun Vale signed when she accepted her own invitation to this feast. There is a clause on the 3rd page about good faith conduct. I want it read aloud at the evening meal. My king. And Bronn, make sure Lady Sigrun is seated in the front row when it is read." Bronn's worn shield face did something it had not done all week. It almost smiled. She tried once more. Of course she did. The night before the formal claiming ceremony, when half the feast had already left and the rest were preparing for the morning, there was a hunt. Pack hunts before a claiming are tradition. The alpha rides, the woman he intends to claim rides, the senior pack rides, and at some point during the dawn ride, the alpha takes the lead, and the woman rides up beside him, and the pack sees it and understands. I was not a rider. I had said so. Halvar had nodded and arranged for me to be given the gentlest mare in the stables, a soft-eyed grey called Ash, who had carried his sister before his sister died, which I learned later, but did not know that morning. The girth strap on Ash's saddle had been cut almost all the way through. I do not know whether the cut was meant to throw me, kill me, or simply humiliate me at the moment the king turned to ride beside me. I do not need to know. The cut existed. It had been done in the hour before the hunt. It had been done by someone with access to the stables and motive to want me unhorsed in front of the pack. I felt the saddle give about half a mile from the gate. Ash was a kind mare. She did not bolt. She felt the wrongness of the weight and stopped, and the saddle slid sideways, and I came off her at a slow, strange angle and hit the frozen ground, hard enough to drive the air out of my lungs, and not, by the smallest grace, hard enough to break anything. The pack was perhaps 30 paces ahead. Halvar was at the front. I have replayed the next part of the morning more times than I can count. He did not turn his horse. He did not call out. He simply dismounted in a single motion that did not look human, and was at my side before the pack had finished registering that I had fallen. He did not touch me. He crouched in the frozen grass 3 paces away and looked at me with an expression I have not seen on his face before or since. Ren! I am fine. Ren! I am fine, Halvar. The girth was cut. I am fine. Help me up. He offered his hand. I took it. I stood. I brushed frost off my cloak with hands that were doing something close to shaking and refusing to admit it. The pack had reached us. Bronn was already crouched by Ash's saddle, examining the leather. He held up the strap. The cut was clean and deliberate, and not visible from above. Halvar looked at the strap. He looked at the pack. His eyes found Sigrun Vale, who had ridden out with her cousins and was at the back of the group, very pale. He did not speak. He simply turned and walked her horse forward and stood in front of her and said one sentence. You will be gone from Iron Hollow before this sun reaches its height. He did not wait for a reply. He came back to me. He looked at Ash, who was nuzzling my shoulder. He looked at me. He looked at the cut strap in Bronn's hand. And then he did the thing I have replayed most of all. He took off his own cloak, the heavy black one with the wolf pelt collar, and he put it around my shoulders. He did not say a word while he did it. He did not meet my eyes. He fastened the clasp at my throat with hands that were not entirely steady. And then he stepped back and waited for me to refuse it, because he had not asked. I did not refuse it. I rode the rest of the hunt with his cloak on my shoulders and my own folded across the saddle in front of me. The pack saw it. Every wolf in Iron Hollow understood, by the time we returned to the gate, what they had been watching. The formal claiming was the next evening, and there was nothing left for anyone to argue about. I will tell you about the claiming because it is the part you came for, but I will tell you the way it actually happened, which is shorter than the version the bards have started telling. The great hall was full. The wolf throne sat empty. Halvar stood in front of it, in black again, with a thin iron circlet on his head, which I had not seen him wear before, and which he had clearly put on for the occasion. The council was arranged in a semicircle. The unclaimed women, the ones who had stayed, sat in the second row. Lady Sigrun was not present. I walked the length of the hall on my own. I did not have a green dress with a heritage pendant. I had a deep grey wool gown the seamstresses had finished to me that afternoon, and the copper coin sewn into a small pocket at the breast, where I had decided that morning it would stay forever. I stopped 3 paces from him. He looked at me. The thing in the corner of his mouth happened again. He did not try to hide it this time. He reached into the pocket of his coat and produced a copper coin. Not mine, a new one. He held it up so the court could see it. 3 days ago, said the Alpha King in the voice he used for proclamations, this woman walked through the gate of Iron Hollow and stopped in front of a man she believed to be a beggar. She gave him the last coin she had. She told him it was for his trouble. The hall was very quiet. I was that beggar, he said. I was sitting at my own gate, watching my own feast, deciding whether I had been right about her. I had been right about her. He looked at me. I have ruled Iron Hollow for 9 years. In that time, I have been offered every kind of currency a king is offered. Gold, pacts, heirs, loyalty, lineage. I have never, in those 9 years, been offered something for my trouble by someone who did not know who I was. He held up the new coin. This is the most valuable thing I own. I am giving it back to her tonight, in front of all of you, because I want every wolf in this hall to understand what I have chosen. Not the rank, not the bloodline. Her. He stepped forward. He placed the coin in my palm. His hand closed around mine for the length of a single breath. He let go. He bent, not far, just enough, and said something quiet against the top of my hair. I will not tell you what he said. That one I am keeping. But what I felt in the moment he said it was not what I had expected. It was not breathlessness. It was not surrender. It was the strangest, simplest thing. A door opening in a wall I had not known I had been leaning against my whole life. The wall came down. I stayed standing. The room did not. When I lifted my face, he kissed me once, briefly, in front of the entire pack, and the kiss was nothing I have words for, except that I understood, finally, why people sing about this. Not because of the kiss, because of the recognition. He had seen me when I thought I was invisible. He had been seen by me when he thought he was hiding. That was the whole story. 3 months later, I'm writing this in the library at Iron Hollow, with the eastern windows pouring sun across the table where the list once sat. The list is gone. I burned it the morning after the claiming, in the great half, and Halvar watched me do it and did not stop me. The 2 coins live in a small carved box on the mantel. We do not speak of them. We do not need to. Aldrich has been moved to the kitchens, where the cook has decided he is to be fattened up before the winter. His cough is better. He has discovered honey. Lady Sigrun Vale has been stripped of her seat on the council, and her family's holdings have been redeeded to a cousin who is, by every account, much kinder to her sister. She lives now in a small house in the north, and writes letters of complaint that no one answers. Bronn has admitted, only to me, that he was rooting for me from the moment I called the king trouble. Halvar is... different is not the right word. He is the same man. The court still bows when he enters a room. The pack still falls quiet when he speaks. But the chair beside the wolf throne is no longer empty, and the library door is left open more often than not, and there is a copper coin in a carved box on a mantle that costs more than the kingdom. Last week he came in from the training yard, took one look at me sitting at the eastern window with this account in my lap, and asked what I was writing. "The truth," I said. "About what?" "About a man I once mistook for a beggar." He stood for a moment in the doorway, the late sun on his face, doing the smallest possible thing with the corner of his mouth. "Tell them I was not entirely sorry to be mistaken," he said. And then he closed the door behind him, gently, the way he closes all doors now, like there is something inside worth keeping safe. "So, tell me, did you see it coming? The first time he looked up from the cold stone and said he would remember? Or did he fool you the way he fooled me?" Leave a comment and let me know. And if her voice was the kind of voice you would spend another evening with, the moon and iron icon at the bottom of your screen is where you find her again. There is more where this came from. There is always more. I am Wren of Iron Hollow now. I will see you at the next fire.